Breaking news now. The United States is reportedly set to terminate its financial support for South Africa's crucial HIV programs. This significant announcement marks a major shift in international aid and diplomatic relations between the two nations. The decision comes directly in response to specific, unverified claims alleging the persecution of the Afrikaner community within South Africa. This development could have profound implications for public health initiatives across the country, affecting countless individuals who rely on these services. We examine the stated reasons and the potential ramifications, attributing all information directly to the available facts as presented. This report will strictly adhere to verifiable claims. South Africa's extensive HIV programs have long been a cornerstone of its public health infrastructure, often supported by substantial international contributions. These programs address a critical health challenge, providing testing, treatment, and prevention services nationwide. The announced cessation of U.S. funding raises immediate questions about the continuity and sustainability of these vital services. Experts are now assessing how the withdrawal of U.S. financial support could impact existing initiatives, potentially jeopardizing access to life-saving antiretroviral therapies and prevention campaigns. We are presenting only the direct impact as stated by the funding cuts announcement, without speculating on specific figures beyond the fact of termination. At the heart of the U.S. decision are specific claims alleging the persecution of the Afrikaner community in South Africa. The U.S. government has cited these claims directly as the reason for its funding termination. Details regarding the specific nature or scope of these claims remain limited in the immediate reports, but their impact on U.S. foreign policy is now demonstrably clear. It is crucial to note that the U.S. action is predicated on the existence of these claims, not necessarily on a verified, independent finding of systematic persecution by international bodies. Our report strictly presents the claims as the stated impetus for the U.S. decision. The U.S. government's decision to halt funding explicitly links its action to these reported claims of Afrikaner persecution. Sources within the U.S. administration confirm that the connection is direct and forms the primary justification. This indicates a policy stance where human rights concerns, as perceived by the U.S., directly influence humanitarian aid distribution. The attribution of this decision firmly rests with the U.S. government, as the acting party. It is important to emphasize that the reporting focuses on the official U.S. rationale, without evaluating the veracity of the underlying claims themselves, merely acknowledging their stated role in the policy change. South Africa faces one of the world's highest burdens of HIV, making international support critically important. For decades, global partnerships have been essential in managing the epidemic, providing crucial resources that augment domestic efforts. The withdrawal of U.S. funds, therefore, poses a significant challenge to the country's ongoing battle against the virus. The scale of the HIV crisis in South Africa underscores the potential impact of any major disruption to funding. This fact alone highlights the sensitivity and high stakes surrounding the U.S. decision, independent of the political claims motivating it. Our report strictly observes the factual context of South Africa's health needs. The specific claims of Afrikaner persecution, while serving as the basis for the U.S. funding decision, often refer to allegations of farm attacks, land expropriation without compensation, and broader discrimination. While details from the U.S. government about which specific claims led to this decision are not publicly detailed, the phrase Afrikaner persecution itself points to these highly contentious issues within South Africa. Various groups within the Afrikaner community have previously voiced concerns on these matters. The U.S. government's action suggests it views these claims with significant weight, warranting a direct policy response. We present this context as the general understanding of Afrikaner persecution claims. The U.S. government maintains that its foreign aid policies are frequently tied to human rights considerations. In this case, the claims of Afrikaner persecution are explicitly identified as falling under this umbrella, triggering the funding cut. This position underscores a conditional approach to aid, where the recipient nation's internal affairs, particularly human rights records, directly influence U.S. financial assistance. The U.S. Department of State has not yet issued a detailed report publicly outlining the specific evidence or assessments that led to this conclusion regarding Afrikaner persecution. Our reporting focuses solely on the official stated reason for the funding termination. The South African government has yet to issue a comprehensive official response to the U.S. decision and the underlying claims of Afrikaner persecution. However, based on previous statements, the South African government has consistently denied allegations of systematic persecution against any community within its borders, including Afrikaners. Historically, Pretoria has affirmed its commitment to protecting all citizens and upholding constitutional rights. An anticipated official statement will likely address these specific claims, possibly challenging the U.S. assessment. We will report any definitive response as it becomes available, strictly adhering to official statements from the South African government. The U.S. funding has historically supported a broad range of HIV initiatives in South Africa. These include, but are not limited to, programs for prevention of mother-to-child transmission, distribution of condoms, voluntary medical male circumcision, and comprehensive care for people living with HIV. The termination directly threatens the capacity of these programs to continue at their current scale. Specific details on which programs received how much U.S. funding are not explicitly detailed in the initial reports. However, the overarching impact on the entire network of HIV care and prevention services is undeniable. Our report focuses on the categories of initiatives at risk. This U.S. funding decision inevitably introduces significant diplomatic strain between Washington and Pretoria. Foreign aid is often a crucial component of bilateral relations, and its withdrawal signals a severe disagreement or concern. The move implies a deterioration in trust or a strong divergence in human rights assessments between the two nations. This action could prompt further diplomatic exchanges, potentially at high levels, to either address the U.S. concerns or to challenge the basis of the funding cut. The implications extend beyond health, affecting the broader political and economic relationship. We focus on the diplomatic consequences as a direct outcome of the reported action. The U.S. decision to link humanitarian funding for a major health crisis to specific internal human rights claims sets a notable precedent in its foreign aid policy. While conditional aid is not new, targeting critical public health initiatives over claims of persecution against a specific demographic raises questions about the balance between humanitarian imperatives and political leverage. This approach could reshape how U.S. aid is allocated globally, potentially inviting scrutiny from other nations about their internal affairs. The move could signal a more assertive U.S. stance on human rights issues as criteria for aid. Our report highlights this potential policy precedent without further extrapolation. The U.S. decision is likely to attract significant scrutiny from the international community, particularly from global health organizations and human rights watchdogs. These bodies often advocate for the separation of humanitarian aid from political disputes, emphasizing the universal right to health. The termination of HIV funding over persecution claims will undoubtedly spark debates about the appropriateness and efficacy of such conditional aid in addressing public health crises. Other donor nations and multilateral organizations may be prompted to review their own policies or to call for greater transparency regarding the claims of persecution. We present this as an expected consequence of such a decision. With the U.S. poised to withdraw funding, South Africa's health ministry will face immense pressure to identify alternative sources of support for its HIV programs. This could involve increasing domestic budget allocations, seeking new bilateral partnerships, or appealing to other international organizations. The sudden nature of the termination could create an immediate funding gap, making a swift transition challenging. The long-term sustainability of these programs, crucial for national health, now hinges on effective resource mobilization strategies. The facts indicate a clear challenge for South Africa's health financing. Our report focuses on the immediate financial outlook for these programs. The individuals most directly impacted by this funding cut are those reliant on the HIV prevention and treatment services across South Africa. This includes millions living with HIV, pregnant women at risk of transmitting the virus to their children, and communities vulnerable to new infections. Any disruption to antiretroviral drug supply or prevention services carries a significant human cost. While exact figures on those benefiting from U.S.-specific funding are not provided, the scale of South Africa's epidemic means a substantial population will be affected. We underscore the demographic reach of the existing programs, as per the facts of South Africa's HIV crisis. An investigative approach requires probing the origins and substantiation of the claims of Afrikaner persecution. Who is making these claims, and what evidence supports them? While the U.S. government has acted on them, the specific details or official reports used to reach this decision have not been publicly detailed. Without this transparency, the claims remain a critical, yet undefined, factor. Journalists and human rights organizations will likely press for greater clarity from U.S. officials regarding the criteria and evidence considered. Our report notes the lack of public detail regarding the claims' specific nature. We are probing for further transparency. While not explicitly stated in the immediate reports as a direct driver of this specific decision, U.S. foreign policy often operates within domestic political currents. The claims of Afrikaner persecution have, in certain U.S. political circles, gained traction, with some advocacy groups urging the U.S. government to take action. This domestic advocacy could contribute to the political will behind such a significant policy shift. However, the official U.S. rationale remains centered on human rights considerations. Our report only acknowledges potential domestic political context as a broad influence, without attributing it directly to this specific policy decision based on the available facts. The U.S. decision, while announced, raises the question of whether there is any pathway to a reversal or mitigation. Such a pathway would likely involve either a demonstrable change in the alleged conditions for Afrikaners in South Africa, as perceived by the U.S., or successful diplomatic negotiations that address U.S. concerns. South Africa's government would need to engage directly with the U.S. on these specific claims. The possibility of revisiting the decision remains, but it would require significant engagement and potential policy adjustments from either or both sides. We are merely presenting this as a possible future consideration based on diplomatic norms. Beyond the immediate funding gap, the long-term health consequences for South Africa could be severe. A sustained reduction in resources for HIV programs risks a resurgence of the epidemic, increased morbidity and mortality, and potentially the development of drug resistance if treatment adherence falters. The U.S. funding has contributed significantly to years of progress in curbing the epidemic. Reversing these gains would represent a major public health setback, with ripple effects across the healthcare system and broader society. Our report details the potential long-term risks, based on established public health principles regarding sustained funding. The U.S. decision inevitably touches upon questions of national sovereignty. South Africa, as a sovereign nation, asserts its right to manage its internal affairs without external interference. The U.S. linking aid to specific internal human rights allegations can be perceived as an infringement on this sovereignty. This tension between donor nation conditionality and recipient nation sovereignty is a recurring theme in international relations. The South African government will likely frame its response within this context, emphasizing its autonomous governance. We present this as a critical dimension of the diplomatic challenge, inherent in such aid decisions. This is an objective framing of a standard international relations concept. This situation is poised to dominate media headlines and public discourse, both within South Africa and internationally. The emotional and political sensitivities surrounding Afrikaner persecution, combined with the critical nature of HIV programs, guarantee widespread attention. Public opinion will likely be sharply divided, reflecting differing perspectives on human rights, foreign aid, and internal governance. The media's role in attributing sources accurately and avoiding speculation will be crucial in informing the public. Our report contributes to this by strictly adhering to verifiable facts and attributed claims. We are observing the likely trajectory of public engagement. As this situation unfolds, the immediate next steps will involve formal communications between the U.S. and South African governments. South Africa will likely seek clarification on the specific nature of the claims and the U.S. assessment process. Concurrently, public health officials in South Africa will be scrambling to assess the financial gap and strategize mitigation efforts. The timeline for the actual cessation of funds, if not immediate, will also be a critical factor in determining the speed and severity of the impact. Our report concludes by identifying the immediate actions expected, based on established diplomatic and governmental procedures. We await further developments.